Back in high school, I dated a guy named Norman. Now, at 29 with a 9-year-old daughter, this tale must have unfolded around 12 to 13 years ago. Norman and I shared that classic teenage love story, complete with promise rings and dreams of a future together. We were each other's first real relationship, navigating the waters of young love. However, as time passed, arguments crept in, and we found ourselves caught in a cycle of breaking up and making up. Immaturity played its part, and during one of our splits, I made the regrettable decision to get involved with another guy, turning our love story into a messy triangle. Eventually, I made the difficult choice to end things with Norman for good, opting for the other guy. Looking back, it's not a moment I'm particularly proud of. But at 17, I lacked the wisdom to see the repercussions of my actions. Fast forward a few years, and I found myself curious enough to create a Facebook account. One day, I decided to reach out to Norman. We connected on Facebook, and I sent him a message expressing my apologies for the past. At that time, I was happily married and had just become a parent to our daughter. Norman took it all in stride, and we maintained a friendly rapport on social media. Our interactions were mostly limited to birthday wishes or the occasional comment on a post. Years passed, and I noticed Norman had entered a relationship with someone named Marissa. I was genuinely pleased to see him moving forward. While my own marriage hadn't worked out, I found contentment in my life, focusing on raising my daughter. During one Christmas, I stumbled upon an old Polaroid of Norman and me, taken during our time together. Feeling nostalgic, I messaged him about it, reminiscing about the good times we shared. However, to my surprise, there was no response. It wasn't until later that I discovered I had been removed from his friends list. Months later, I received a message from Marissa, filled with derogatory remarks. She had seen my previous message to Norman and demanded I cease any further communication with him. She went on to boast about her relationship with Norman, comparing the gifts he gave her to what he had given me in the past. Despite her provocation, I chose not to engage with her outlandish claims. After my Facebook ordeal, I decided to create a brand new profile, adding only close friends and family. However, it wasn't long before I started receiving friend requests from strangers. Somehow I knew it was her. The first account I mistakenly accepted began bombarding me with abusive messages, hurling insults and claiming I'd never find true love. From then on, I refused to add anyone I didn't personally know. But she persisted. She found me on Instagram, Twitter, and even got hold of my phone number. When Snapchat emerged, she resurfaced under a fake profile using the name of one of my Facebook friends, complete with eerie symbols and cursive writing. I maintained my stance of blocking and refusing contact because, frankly, I felt powerless. Then, this year, I ventured onto a dating app. Within a week, I met Nate. His profile seemed normal, just a few average-looking pictures. Nothing raised any red flags. He claimed he couldn't FaceTime due to having an Android phone, but he suggested we talk on the phone instead. As our conversations progressed, it became evident that I was speaking with a man. We exchanged texts for a few weeks, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Feeling optimistic, I suggested we meet up. About a week before our scheduled meeting, he delved into questions about my past relationships. At first, I didn't read too much into it. He seemed genuinely interested, particularly when asking about my first serious relationship. He wanted to know if I still had feelings for my ex. I reassured him that while I didn't harbor any romantic feelings, I didn't despise my ex either. In fact, I acknowledged that I was the one who had caused the rift, and my ex was actually a decent guy. We delved into details about that past relationship, and he expressed eagerness about our upcoming meeting. We agreed to meet at an outdoor cafe, as I wasn't comfortable with him coming directly to my house, considering I still didn't know much about him. I was thrilled. It was my first date in quite some time. So, imagine my bewilderment when I spotted a woman approaching, smiling in my direction. She sat down, and I was too stunned to utter a word. And yes, it was indeed a woman. It was Marissa. She wore a smug expression and greeted me with a casual, "Hey babe," maintaining that unsettling smile. Confessing, she revealed that she was behind it all from the beginning. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. What had I done to deserve such relentless actions from her? Why invest so much time and energy into this elaborate scheme? According to Marissa, it all began nearly 6 years ago when she and Norman started dating. He had mentioned his previous relationship, and that's when Marissa decided to investigate. She scrolled through my profile, scrutinizing every photo and post, trying to understand what he had seen in me. When I messaged him, she confronted him, demanding to know why there were photos of us together and why he still had me on Facebook. In response, Norman unfriended me and promised Marissa he'd cut all ties with me. Marissa confessed her disdain for me, accusing me of toying with people's emotions. She admitted to creating fake accounts to monitor my activities, ensuring I stayed away from her and Norman. It was unnerving to learn that she went as far as walking by places I mentioned being, just to ensure Norman wasn't secretly meeting up with me. By the way, I live outside their city, yet she still went to great lengths to keep tabs on me. She even managed to track down where I worked through my LinkedIn profile. What's more, she enlisted one of her friends to impersonate Nate during our phone conversations. But perhaps the most disturbing part of it all was her fixation on my daughter. Marissa became utterly fixated, convinced that my daughter bore some resemblance to Norman, and even went as far as to believe that I had kept a child secret from him. She warned me against even considering revealing this to him, claiming that she would be the only one to give him a baby. I was beyond horrified. I remember abruptly rising from the table, instructing her never to contact me again. As I sat in my car in stunned silence, my first instinct was to call my daughter's school and inform them of the situation, warning them to be vigilant about anyone other than me or her father attempting to pick her up. Next, I called my brother and recounted everything that had happened. He insisted I contact the police, but when I did, they explained they couldn't intervene without concrete evidence linking Marissa to the harassment. It's been 2 months now, and thankfully, I haven't heard anything from her. My brother believes she achieved her goal of establishing herself as Norman's sole focus and will now leave me alone. However, the paranoia still lingers. I'm constantly vigilant about what I share on social media, wary of where she might be lurking next. I've briefed my family and friends about the situation, warning them not to accept friend requests from suspicious profiles. I even shared a photo of Marissa with my neighbors, urging them to alert the authorities if they see her near my home. After all, I wouldn't put it past her to know my address and attempt to peer through our windows. As an extra precaution, I've changed the locks on my doors.
A few years back, I was seeing this girl named Christine. We were together for around 5 months before calling it quits. Surprisingly, we ended things amicably and even managed to stay somewhat in touch. By that, I mean we exchanged occasional texts just to check in on each other. It was nice knowing there were no hard feelings and that everything was cool between us. Then one day, out of the blue, I got a text from her. She explained how she was in the process of moving and had hit a snag with the leases on her apartments and all that complicated stuff. She mentioned needing a place to crash for a couple of days and asked if she could stay at my spot. I was a bit hesitant at first, but being the nice guy that I am, I agreed. I had reservations, anticipating potential awkwardness, but I reassured myself that since I'd be working most of the time, we wouldn't have to interact much. When she arrived, we exchanged brief pleasantries, and things seemed okay. She settled on the couch while I retired to my bedroom. After work, we exchanged a few more words before I retreated to my room for the night. As I lay in bed around 11 p.m., typically a time I sleep soundly, I found myself wide awake, surrounded by darkness. As I tried to drift back to sleep, a sense of unease crept over me. It dawned on me that Christine was in the apartment, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Slowly, I opened my eyes and saw her standing at the foot of my bed. Her expression twisted into a menacing scowl. It was unsettling, to say the least. Her her gaze filled with what seemed like pure animosity. I mustered the courage to ask if everything was all right, but she remained silent, just glaring at me. Sitting upright, I noticed her take a few steps back, as if my movement startled her. Once more, I inquired about her well-being, but again, met with silence. Without a word, she turned and exited the room, closing the door behind her with an eerie calmness. Confusion engulfed me as I tried to make sense of the situation. Eventually, exhaustion overtook my bewilderment, and I managed to drift back into slumber, though the encounter lingered in my mind. I speculated that she might have been sleepwalking, though I couldn't recall her ever mentioning it during our time together. The following morning, before heading to work, I recounted the strange encounter to her. To my surprise, she reacted with disbelief, insisting that I must be joking. When I asked if she ever sleepwalked, she adamantly denied it, claiming she had never experienced such episodes before. Feeling perplexed, I grappled with alternative explanations. Maybe I had dreamt the entire incident, but it felt too vivid, too real to be just a dream. It was unlike anything I had ever dreamt before, and I was certain I was fully awake at the time. The next night I found myself once again awakened from slumber. This time I sat up, scanning the room for any sign of disturbance. Relief washed over me as I found no one at the end of my bed. Yet an eerie feeling lingered as I scrutinized every corner of the room, searching for answers. In the dead of night, I noticed Christine's head peering cautiously around the doorway, her expression still contorted into that unsettling glare. Our eyes met briefly before she withdrew, leaving me staring at the empty doorway, bewildered. Minutes passed, and her head reappeared, fixated on me once more. I called out to her, but she retreated and closed the door, leaving me to grapple with a sleepless night. Thankfully, that marked the end of her stay. She departed early the next morning, leaving me to ponder the bizarre occurrences of the previous nights. I recounted the incidents to her once more before she left, and once again, she seemed genuinely surprised. To this day, I remain puzzled by her behavior, unable to comprehend what drove her actions. It's a mystery that still lingers, haunting me with unanswered questions.
I hail from West Virginia, but I made the bold move all the way to Lexington, Kentucky for a girl. Now that might seem like the scariest part of the story. A guy from West Virginia crossing the border into Kentucky solely for a girl. But believe me, it gets worse. Much worse. She was incredibly affectionate when we first got together. It was like a dream come true, the perfect girlfriend. However, as time passed and we grew more comfortable in the relationship, that affection dwindled to almost nothing. It happened gradually, like a slow leak, barely noticeable, until one day I realized there was little left of our connection. We became more like roommates, hardly spending any quality time together. Intimacy became a rare occurrence, stretching over months at a time. In the end, sharing a bed with her became so disheartening that I found myself preferring the couch. Soon enough, I began referring to the couch as my bed. When we finally broke up officially, it was painful, but not entirely unexpected. I had seen it coming from miles away, and in some ways it was a relief. That's when I started conversing with this girl on Reddit. Now let me be clear. I was never unfaithful to my girlfriend, not even once. But after the breakup, I found myself craving affection and female attention like never before. I searched for companionship wherever I could find it. Dating apps didn't seem like my thing. I preferred the anonymity of Reddit. Eventually, I connected with a girl on the Ars Gaming subreddit. We exchanged numbers and began making plans to meet. Despite her living all the way in Arizona, the idea of flying out to meet her didn't faze me. She was kind and beautiful, and I was eager to meet her in person. I remember staying up late into the night, whispering into the phone so my ex wouldn't overhear. We excitedly discussed all the things we'd do together, the places she'd show me in Phoenix, and the delicious Mexican food we'd indulge in. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, filled with anticipation. But I didn't wake up feeling the same way. I was jolted awake by loud crashing noises coming from the TV room, just a few feet away from me. Initially, I thought it was a break-in, but when I looked around, it was my ex. She was wielding a baseball bat, relentlessly smashing my Xbox. I screamed at her, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. As I reached for my phone to call the cops, I realized it wasn't where I usually left it to charge. Panic set in when I couldn't find it. My ex launched into a tirade about my supposed infidelity, claiming she knew everything. She even mentioned the Reddit girl by name before swinging the bat at me. I stumbled backward over the couch, narrowly avoiding the blow. The sight of the bat whizzing past my face sent a surge of fear through me. She chased me around the apartment, swinging the bat with all her might until I managed to lock myself in the bathroom, seeking refuge from the chaos. I had hoped I could reason with her through the bathroom door, to explain that the girl from Reddit was someone I started talking to only after we broke up. But she wasn't having any of it. She relentlessly tried to break down the door, and it's a miracle she didn't succeed. It felt like a scene straight out of The Shining, as she pounded a hole through one of the wood panels, screaming threats through it. Thank goodness the hole wasn't big enough for her to reach through and unlock the door, or I'd have been in serious trouble. Eventually, she calmed down enough to stop trying to harm me physically, but she demanded that I leave the apartment immediately. I didn't even take the time to gather all my belongings. I just threw some essentials into a bag and fled. The fear of her sneaking up on me with a kitchen knife haunted me as I left. Some people have asked me why I didn't just restrain her, why I was so afraid of a girl. But that's the dumbest response to this whole ordeal. A swing from that bat or a well-placed stab wound doesn't care about gender. I got out of there as fast as I could, driving to a motel where I spent the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The next morning, I called my mom back in West Virginia and poured out everything that had happened. She agreed to let me stay with her for a while until I could get back on my feet. I would have gone back to the apartment to retrieve the rest of my things, but I feared she'd either smash or burn everything I owned. Besides, by that point, I was just relieved to be out of there. And let me tell you, I've never set foot in Kentucky since then. I'll wait until Tyler Childers comes back around to Virgie before I bring up all those painful memories again.